Hey, this is Bryce, and thanks for tuning into my YouTube channel, Jack of Trades. In this video, I want to show off what I think is probably one of the coolest Futaba radios. Actually, let me clarify that. One of the coolest vintage Futaba radios that was ever made. So I recently picked up a used RC car lot. It came with a car, some wheels, bodies, you know, the typical used car lot, and a radio. Turns out the radio actually didn't have the matching crystal for the receiver, but I was able to dig through my collection of crystals and find a matching set that would work with the radio gear. So I went ahead and pulled out the radio gear, and then I pulled out the radio gear from the car because, you know, I'm going to rebuild the car anyways. And I wanted to test the radio out, and I'll get into that. And I don't know a whole lot about all the radios that are out there, that have been out there. When it comes to Futaba radios, we kind of remember the original, I don't even know the original, but like the brown box radios with the steering wheel, the single knob. Many of us are familiar with the Magnum Juniors and the Magnum Sports. But to be honest, I don't remember anything about this, which is the Magnum. Well, some people call it the Magnum Senior. This is the 3PG, or FP-T 3PG. This is a 3-channel AM radio that came out sometime in the early to mid 80s. I think what's cool about this radio is that it is loaded. I mean, loaded with features that I didn't even realize they had on radios back in the 80s. And they didn't really. This is kind of a diamond in the rough when it comes to radios, as far as the features that it has. And so that's what I kind of want to show off, is some of the features that are available on radios today, but having them on radios 40 years ago, I think is impressive. So let's start with, I mean, a lot of it's mechanics, right? Well, if you just look at the radio, it's got tons and tons of knobs. So we've got 7 knobs on the front. We have a knob down here. We've got an adjustment screw here. There's an adjustment screw down there. There's a toggle switch. We've got 4 more knobs on the back. And then if you pull out the module here, it's got 3 more switches underneath here. And I'm going to go over what all these things do. So let's start with the battery. This has a detachable battery brick. Look at that. And you can get NiCad versions of this, or you could. And this has the 8-cell battery pack in it. See? But they made a NiCad for this. And I guess the only thing I can think of having this detachable is because then you can actually put a little, because then you can have a cord attaching the radio to the battery, or the battery to a charger. But I think the idea was that you can put the battery in your pocket or in your waistband, and it lightened up the weight of the radio for comfort. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But that's kind of a cool feature, and I've seen that on the Noble radios, and I don't know if maybe some of the newer radios also have that feature. But it's interesting. And that just pops on with a little spring clip. So then in the handle we have an adjustment for your throttle position, or your throttle throw. And I've seen that in high-end radios, but it's just kind of interesting. And then underneath here we have an adjustment screw for the steering wheel tension to adjust that spring preload. And that's pretty cool. Again, these are features you would see on high-end radios. And this, I guess, was technically a high-end radio. It was marketed for the racer. But I just think it's interesting to have these features in a radio from 40 years ago. What else? So here we have a knob for steering dual rates. So that's one adjustment, which is kind of cool. Then up here we've got 2 knobs. These are exponentials, so you can actually set exponential curves for both steering and throttle. And this is all analog, right? This is not a computer radio, and this is something you would expect to see in a computer radio, but not necessarily in an analog radio, especially from 40 years ago. So then we got steering trim, or this is adjustable travel volume. I think it's otherwise known as endpoint adjustment, but it adjusts your endpoints on both left and right steering. And then we've got brake trim. So you basically have brake trim and throttle trim, and they kind of, it's kind of weird when you play with it because the brake kind of, like I had the speed controller on, and the brake kind of bleeds into the throttle. So I don't know. Basically, you want to try to look at what that curve looks like as you adjust these, because it does some weird stuff that doesn't quite make sense. But it makes sense when you're tuning it. But I'm trying to imagine that throttle curve as you adjust these two, and that's what I'm having a hard time visualizing. So then you've got an auxiliary knob for a third channel switch. For third channel, you got your steering trim. Throttle trim is already done with the knobs. And then on the back we have an additional, well actually before I get into that, here we have a toggle switch which is marked warm up. So this is a feature for nitro cars where when you hit this, I mean you think okay idles up the engine, but it actually doesn't. It revs the engine, and it's really cool. It's a really cool feature that I don't think I've ever seen on a radio before. But it revs it. It doesn't just give you a high idle, it revs it. So on the back here, you have another switch for adjusting the timing of that rev. Actually, it's this guy here. This is a brake limit. And there's some, I found the manual online. I went through it, but this kind of mixes in with the brake trim on the front. And then we got throttle points here as well. And then the other thing that's cool is this uses an RF module, and the only time I saw RF modules was with the RC planes, and then the higher end, the newer Futaba. I had a couple of 3PMs, Futaba 3PMs, and they have the modules, which are kind of cool because you could swap them out, and you could run the PCM module or the AM module or the FM module or the synthesize module. But it gave you some flexibility with what you're doing. This is all before 2.4 gigahertz, right? So it gave you some flexibility with what you were connecting or controlling your radio with. So inside here, those three switches are the reverse switches for the 3 channels. You had to put them somewhere, right? So, a couple more cool features on this radio. The head swivels. That is pretty awesome. And what it allows you to do is, well, like I have a Noble radio, and the steering wheel swivels as well, so you can kind of get that custom grip based on how you hold it that's comfortable. But what this really, I think, is intended for is people who run left-handed radios, so you don't have to, you know, if the radio is even configurable for left-hand, right-hand, but it's an instant change, right? You can instantly go from left-hand to right-hand without doing anything, essentially. The other kind of cool, clever thing is this swing up or flip away antenna. And it is replaceable, so this unscrews. But I just thought it's kind of cool to have that little pivot there, right? And it actually toggles at different positions. So here we got, what? We got 30 degrees, 60 degrees, and then 90 degrees. And actually it goes back to, I guess, 120. So yeah, that's kind of cool. So what I want to do now is demonstrate the radio, because it does work. I mean, I wasn't getting this car out for the radio. I just got the radio and I started looking at it. I just thought, wow, this radio is really cool. So yeah, we're set up, and this is the radio gear that was in the car, but I had to get a crystal to work with it. So let's turn this on. The radio's off, so I'm getting all this noise. There we go. Now we're clean. So we got steering, and we got our motor. So what I want to show is that warm-up function. So when I turn it on, it just blips. It's blipping the throttle, which is really cool. So let's adjust that too. And right now I have it turned down, and then I got turned up. So you can imagine if you have a nitro engine and you're running rich at idle, or you're cold, or you just want to warm it up, you can use this to kind of blip that throttle. So I'm pretty happy with it. It's something cool to kind of showcase, but I mean, you know, it's obviously used, so it's not really collectible in that sense, but it's just a cool radio. It looks cool. It has these cool functions. unfortunately, being AM and kind of older, it's probably susceptible to interference and noise. If you know anything about this radio or have any cool vintage radios that you want to share with us, go ahead and comment below. And that's all I got. Thanks for tuning in and watching. Have a good one. Bye.